Sonic the Hedgehog is a series that is no stranger to handheld devices, whether it be the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, 3DS, or even more obscure handhelds like the PSP and the Neo Geo. And it all started in the 1990s with the Sega Game Gear. Released in October of 1990, with a power level similar to the Sega Master System, this console was more or less the Sega equivalent to the multiple variations of the Game Boy being released around the time, such as the Game Boy Light. Seeing as the mascot of the company debuted less than a year later, there were a lot of Sonic games released for the system, 12 to be exact. And with so many interesting games of varying quality on the Game Gear, I thought we'd take a look at all of them and rank them from worst to best. Something I should mention is how some of the games on this list were also released for the Sega Master System. If a game on the list was also released for the Master System, then that version will factor into the placement of the game, and will most likely be the version I record footage from. And with that, let's properly begin. The absolute worst Sonic game on the Game Gear by a long shot has to be Sonic Blast. This is a game that I downright despise. The level design is flat and uninteresting, the special stages are hardly hidden, especially considering I found two on accident, and besides, most of the time in them is spent trying to battle your own depth perception while trying to collect rings. The controls in this game are especially clunky, the character sprites are massive, which makes platforming difficult, Sonic feels really sluggish to control, which isn't helped by how slow the game feels. The bosses are average. They aren't good per se, but they're playable. However, the one thing that Blast has other games on this list don't is having Chuckles the Enchilada as a playable character. Thing is, having more playable characters just doesn't help when it simply isn't fun to play the levels. But easily the most standout part of this game is the visuals, unfortunately. As the name Sonic Blast suggests, this game was made as a handheld tie-in to 3D Blast on the Sega Genesis and the Sega Saturn, and as such, they made the visuals using a similar tactic to Donkey Kong Country, where they took 3D renders of the characters and converted them into sprites. Unlike Donkey Kong Country, however, Blast looks downright awful. No, visuals do not make or break a game, but still what you're going to be looking at for the whole game, and piled on top of how terrible the rest of it is, this is a game I would not recommend. Fortunately, it's also the only thing on this list that I dislike this much, and it gets far better from here. At number 11, narrowly missing the bottom, is Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for the Sega Game Gear. I don't hate this game, but I just don't think it's all that interesting. This is a simple visual remake of the original on Genesis, which itself was a reskin of the game Puyo Puyo. However, there really isn't anything it has going for it over either version. It's still somewhat fun, but there really isn't any reason to play it now that the original is playable on handheld too. At number 10, we have Sonic Spinball for the Sega Game Gear. I'm not going to spend much time talking about this one, seeing as it has the same issues that Mean Bean Machine had. It's a simple remake and not much else, except now it has clunkier controls. The only reason it beat out Mean Bean Machine is because I simply find Spinball more interesting, though both are more or less interchangeable. At number 9, the first game in the category that I consider to be pretty decent, we have Sonic Drift, the first racing game in the series, and frankly, it shows. This isn't a bad game, however. You can choose from 4 characters, those being Sonic, Tails, Amy, and Eggman, each one having a few differences in how they play. There are 4 track themes, each based on levels from Sonic 1. The racing is fairly good, and I actually thought it was pretty fun. The main reason it's down this low is because at random times, I would try to drift and would be hit by nothing, though I could have just been doing it wrong. All in all, Drift is solid, and worthy of number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Sonic Drift 2. This is a direct improvement from the first game. Fundamentally, it's the same, but now with added characters and stages. The 2 new characters that are included are Fang the Sniper from Sonic Triple Trouble and Metal Sonic from Sonic CD. Both characters play fairly well, and I ended up playing as Fang for most of my playthrough. The new tracks are all decently good, including newly introduced courses that have an actual beginning and end as opposed to just laps. I ended up enjoying this game quite a lot, however, there were 7 more that I simply thought were better. At number 7, we have Tails Sky Patrol. Before this became a Sonic game, there's actually quite a bit of evidence pointing to this once having been a Disney project. This was also a Japanese-only title before it came over to the West with the Sonic Gems collection. You play as Tails, who, for some reason, is now carrying a large ring, and you have to fly through a barrage of obstacles and enemies, collecting power-ups while you do it in order to fight a new group of villains called the Witch Cutters. This is a pretty bizarre game, and I found it was quite enjoyable, well, with all the split-second decisions and interesting level layout. Some parts could be confusing for a moment, but becoming understandable quite quickly, such as a large spinning board. The only thing that confuses me about this game is the level of difficulty. After all, Tails is a character that's aimed at younger audiences. Imagine that this would be hard for them to beat. At number 6, defying all logic and reason, is Sonic Labyrinth. I can explain. This is a game that people seem to absolutely hate. And when I first started, I was certain I would too. But as I played it, I actually started to find it pretty fun. Let's start with the biggest criticism that's often leveled at this game: making Sonic slow. This is an isometric game where you must find 3 keys and make it to the goal in a given time limit. However, when walking around, one thing is incredibly apparent, and that is that Sonic is significantly slowed down compared to usual. And this has one of the dumbest story reasons behind it in the series. Apparently, Dr. Eggman, with all his 300 IQ, had the genius idea to replace Sonic's shoes with terrible ones in an attempt to slow him down. And for some reason, it actually worked. But the thing is, if walking was the only way to get around, then I'd probably hate this game. But what counters this is the spin dash. Not only does it make you move fast, but you can stop on a dime, meaning most of my time in this game was spent spin dashing. Another complaint that surrounds this game is how all of your keys go flying if you get hit by an enemy, and you need to recollect them if you don't pick them up in time. However, this really only became an issue to me during the later stages. Honestly, I'm not quite sure why I like this game as much as I do, but until I come to my senses, Sonic Labyrinth is staying at number 6. Now, at number 5, we have Tails Adventure. This is yet another Tails solo game where you must fly around levels, doing platforming while fighting a new group of enemies called Kakus. The story is quite unique. According to the manual, Tails is vacationing at the newly introduced Tails Island, when suddenly a bunch of bad people start an invasion. Now, I don't understand why the island is named after Tails, but this is a working premise. Getting the biggest problem out of the way is the speed. I know it's more of a Tails game than a Sonic one, but he just moves so slowly here, and this isn't even an attempt at momentum. But, outside of that, this is solid. Tails can do all the usual stuff, such as flying with a limit, but now he can also throw bombs to attack the birds. You have an unlimited amount of these and can use them to your leisure. Why bombs, I'm not quite sure, but that is what they went with. On top of that, there is some pretty simple platforming and occasional puzzle solving, so it is pretty effective. This is a very simple game, and it's probably the least mentioned one on this list, but at the end of the day, it is fun. Personally, I can't wait for Tails Adventure 2. Now, at number 4, we have Sonic the Hedgehog 8-bit, released for the Master System and Game Gear. Unlike Mean Bean Machine and Spinball, this is only partially a remake. There are a bunch of things that are completely original to this game, such as Bridge Zone or removing Sonic's nose in the Game Gear version, which unfortunately did not carry over to the Master System. This is also the first full look that was given of South Island, which was replicated somewhat recently in Sonic Origins. For the first handheld Sonic game and first 8-bit Sonic game, this is really solid, with fun platforming and good visuals. The main reason it's in 4th, however, is because in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't do a whole lot to stand out much. It's good, yes, but the others I consider to be superior. In 3rd place, we have Sonic Chaos. This is the first game on the list to be considerable as great for the systems it was on. The story is the usual Sonic vs. Eggman shtick, with new details to spice it up, such as South Island sinking into the sea if the Chaos Emeralds aren't acquired, and Eggman wanting to use the Chaos Emeralds to make nuclear weapons. The level design is quite fun, and 2 completely new power-ups were made just for this game, these being the rocket shoes, which allow you to fly over the level, and spring shoes, which increase your jump height drastically. These help keep the game radically fresh compared to the others. Each of the new zones looks absolutely fantastic, with Gigapolis Zone and Mecha Green Hill Zone being my personal favourites. The bosses all have room for improvement as they're all fairly easy, but they're decent overall. However, this game has one major flaw that keeps it from being second, and that is how ridiculously short Sonic Chaos is. Most of the stages can be beaten in under a minute, with some even taking shorter than 30 seconds. This all takes an abrupt 180 though as soon as you reach the final boss, which for some reason is super difficult, especially with ricochet lasers he shoots. But that's the one and only instance of actual difficulty. It's kind of a shame this game is so short, but as is, it sits at number 3. In second place, quite fittingly, is Sonic 2 8-bit. Despite sharing the name as a Genesis game, Sonic 2 for the Genesis and Master System is a completely original game, with all new zones, bosses, and story. In this game, Tails acts kind of like Princess Peach, as he's captured by Eggman and needs to be rescued. Different from the princess, however, getting the bad ending of this game implies that he actually dies, or at least never seen again. Outside of Gimmick Mountain, all the new zones are really good, with Aqua Lake being especially great visually, and Sky High being incredibly confusing. The only zone I have actual problems with is Scrambled Egg Zone, which is home to the stupidest gimmick ever. It's filled with pipes that change your direction by holding down something on the D-pad. This maze is so confusing and so unnecessarily tedious, I wonder why they decided to approve it in the first place. At least the boss at the end is alright. Another thing this game does is being the first to introduce a robotic Sonic double in the form of Silver Sonic, aka Mecha Sonic Mark Zero. The other bosses range from incredibly easy to incredibly easy and I'm just bad at the game. All in all, Sonic 2 has problems, but it's still well worth playing. Now, we've made it all the way to first place. And so, the grand winner of all of this is Sonic Triple Trouble. I don't think that's much of a surprise. Sonic Triple Trouble is a sequel to Sonic Chaos, and this is a genuinely really good Sonic game. The first and biggest thing this game does over the others is try to more emulate the things that made the Genesis trilogy so special, in the way of having cool moments to set it apart. For example, running on a train that's also a boss, or fighting multiple villains, hence the name Triple Trouble. The story is a simple Eggman bad go stop him, but now, apparently he tricked Knuckles into fighting Sonic, yet again. I do have a problem with this, mainly because it kind of misrepresents the character. However, something Triple Trouble definitely does right, is the new villain, Fang the Sniper. It's kind of a shame he never made it to the main cast. Fang is in the special stages at the end, where you'll start a boss fight for him, or, for the very first stage, he'll be hit by his own trap. He gives this game a lot of its own identity, and it's always fun to fight him. Apart from that, the other bosses are all pretty good and have amazing names such as Wood Butterundorf, Giga Thomas Penn, and Marvashapopoulos Gao. What? Accompanying these fights, all the gameplay and zones are pretty great. Feels like Chaos if the levels were longer in the best way possible. The 2 power-ups from Chaos are also here, and in a snow themed level, we even get a new power-up that's basically a snowboarding section from Ice Cap Zone. All in all, I think this is the closest we've ever gotten to an actual Sonic 4. I know people have said that about Sonic Mania, but this feels more like its own sub-series. And Sonic 4, I don't like Sonic 4. All in all, if you are interested in the Game Gear titles and haven't played this, you should definitely give it a try. And that concludes each and every Game Gear Master System game ranked. Now, these games aren't exactly obscure, but they're definitely overlooked, and it was interesting to see them all side by side. Nothing here is a masterpiece, but they are worth acknowledging as some of Sonic's history in a time where the brand wasn't quite as established as it is today, and it would be cool to see some of these remastered in a collection at some point. Now, if you haven't noticed, this is my very first video, so if you have any critiques on how it can improve, please let me know in the comments below. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.